Welcome back to Senate Education, April 30th, 3:25 p.m. We are looking at S16, school discipline bill. We've asked our leg counsel, Mr. Desmarais, to take us through the differences. Senator Hooker presented this bill on the floor, and I know she's been keeping an eye on it over in the House, and it's up for action on Tuesday, as is S115. So I've scheduled a walkthrough of S115 for sometime next week. That was our miscellaneous education bill, which has grown a little bit. So with that, Mr. Desmarais, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let me bring this up on the screen for you.
Okay.
I have to be enabled first.
Jeannie, you still there? I think she probably.
I am, just a second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, so we are here. Okay, so for the record, Jim Damer, that's console. We're walking through a side-by-side of S16 as passed by the Senate and S16 as passed by House Education. This has not reached the floor yet. It goes through House Appropriations unchanged from what House Education recommends. On the left is as passed by the Senate. On the right is as passed by House Education, and changes or differences are in yellow. So these white parts are all the same on findings until you get to this. So there's a new finding added by House Education that talks about students who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. So this is setting a study that focuses on ensuring safe and affirming schools for all students who are LGBTQ plus, and notes that they face a disproportionately higher rates of school discipline, including detention, suspension, and expulsion. That's a finding. And then the finding that the Senate passed was rewritten by the House Education Committee. It's their 8th here. And the reason they did that is AOE came in and testified that the finding in 7 on the left was inaccurate, had to be updated. So on the right, what the House Education Committee has done is to say that the Agency of Education publishes data on school discipline in Vermont annually. However, some of the data can be challenging to find or understand. B, consistent with federal student privacy laws and regulations, certain data may not be publicly reportable due to Vermont's extremely small size conditions, such as data with very few reported cases, data on specific incidents or actions, and data disaggregated by student demographics or grade level characteristics. And C, even when available and reportable, care must be taken when using data to inform practice in order to ensure they are applied in a coherent and methodologically defensible manner. And D, while the Agency of Education and Vermont supervisory unions are currently working to improve data collection, stewardship, reform processes, and infrastructure, this work is in the context of enhancing data quality, data literacy, and the technical infrastructure to support these enhancements. So all this language here we went through in 8 replaces what you had in 7. Then on the task force, they changed the name. So you had the task force on school exclusionary discipline reform, and they have task force on equitable and inclusive school environments. Then membership, you had the secretary choosing 20 members from various categories listed on the left. They have identified specific people for the task force. So 16 members, you have the usual suspects, secretary, and the B's here. You've got the commissioner of mental health as well. And then going down to H here, you've got one member appointed by legal aid, one member appointed by the Vermont Family Network, one member appointed by Building Effective Strategies for Teaching Students Project at UVM, one member appointed by the Vermont Restorative Collaboration, one teacher appointed by the NEA, one member of a therapeutic school appointed by the Vermont Independent Schools Association, one school counselor appointed by the Vermont School Counselors Association, two high school students appointed by the Vermont Principals Association in consultation with Up for Learning. And then you've got language about diverse racial diversity on the task force. Powers and duties. So they have added, take into account the Vermont Youth Behavior survey. That's there in both, but they've added in relevant data reported by the Agency of Education. In terms of specific tasks on A, the first one, they've added in review current behavioral supports and in services that you already have. B is the same, except they've added, C is the same, they've added a new D, which is to review school professional development programs and make recommendations on how educator practices such as positive behavioral interventions and support trauma-informed practices and restorative practices and related training for these practices can increase educators' awareness of students' needs and manner to reduce behaviors that lead to possible out-of-school discipline measures. On E, they have some different wording here. So you've got on the left-hand side, identify best practice procedures that minimize law enforcement contacts for students. They've got identify best practices for students facing in-school or exclusionary discipline that minimize law enforcement contacts, are trauma responsive, and maximize relational and restorative actions that support social, emotional, and mental health needs of these students. F, you've got compile, they've got review. So this is about data. So this is, they have it as being review data that is readily available in processes on suspensions and expulsions and review to inform the work of the task force. And you're using the word compile here. So different wording on that. The rest of this page is the same. And then you have a difference here. F, you focus your F on recommending changes in the types of data collected and data collection processes. And later in the bill, you've got that the state board has to implement what they recommend. And House Education took a different view and don't focus on data collection and requiring the state board to take action. They instead, in G here, say recommend how to ensure that school staff who collect, process, or communicate data understand the importance of data quality, the context of their role, and the rules of government data collection processes, communication, and public disclosure. So you have a different focus here on this F and G. Those are just conforming changes. It's all the same. They have two reports. They have an interim report required by January 15th of next year, and a final report by March 15th of next year. And you've got one report to November 30 of this year. And then they've added an end date to the task force here, which is typical. That was probably just an omission by me on your side. And then the appropriations changed from 15,000 to 6,750 because we know who the members are in their bill, and we know who needs to be compensated and who does not. On 4, they have changed for B here. I mentioned this earlier. Says on or before July 1 of next year, the secretary and state board shall incorporate the task force data collection and practice recommendations developed above. And they moved away from that. They have different language that says at the first meeting of the task force, the secretary shall provide an overview and training to the task force on how to navigate the agency's website and the readily available data collection that provides data on school suspensions and expulsions from each Vermont public school. Outcome analysis is the same. They've changed the statutory change on suspensions and expulsions to prohibit not just expelling students who are 8 years of age or younger, but also to include they can't be suspended. And they have changed the language on threat to say poses an imminent threat as opposed to a threat. The section 7 is the same. The effective date is the same. They changed the name of the bill to say an act relating to the task force on equitable and inclusive school environments to reflect the name change they have put in. So that is it on the tab.
So it seems like the bones are there for sure. Some changes. Jeannie, would you, are you there?
Yes, he does. 113.
Let me see if I can grab Jeannie just while I'm thinking of this.
I'm here. I was doing things behind the scenes, so it took me a bit.
Would you ask Jay Diaz to join our committee on Tuesday? He was helpful in constructing the bill. And we'll put S16 on the agenda at some point on Tuesday, and you and I can talk about it after committee, but Jay Diaz would be great to have him in.
Okay.
Questions right now for Mr. Desmarais? Cheryl?
I think the changes specified things more and made them, more clearer as to what the intent is. I know we had talked about the composition of the task force and kind of left it general, but their being more specific makes sense. So.
Yeah, that seems where there's a lot of change. Mr. Desmarais, having followed the work, what would you classify as the biggest change away from our intention?
Away from your intention.
From our intention of the work that we were trying to do. Anything that you feel as though?
I think it was very much in line with your intention. That's how I kind of read it.
Okay. Yeah. Senator Persily.
I wondered if Jim could tell us why they wanted to change the name, which it's a good name, Equitable and Inclusive School Environments, but that seems much more broad than exclusionary discipline, which was definitely the core of the bill as it was introduced. So I didn't know what did they add that they felt like that it was much more broad than discipline.
I don't think it was around breadth. I think it was around just having a more positive name, as opposed to one about exclusion and discipline, having more of a positive feeling about the name of the task force.
Now,
It doesn't really change
go ahead, Senator Pursley.
because they didn't really change what their task force is doing. They just wanted what they thought was a more positive name.
And they didn't change the name of the bill itself.
They did.
They did. Okay. To the same. Oh, I see. So they, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Senator Pursley.
And one just detailed question: when they put a word in there to say that the task force will cease to exist, what happens if we create task force and we say like they have to meet 5 times? We can't say they cease to exist. Do they not cease to exist? It seems like we do that often. Maybe it's just a new thing that the House is doing now to make sure that it's explicit that they don't exist.
Usually we put that language in. So usually we put a task force ceases to exist the day after it delivers its final report. That's standard practice that we do. It was in your side as a mission, but it's been added back here.
So they could, if we don't do that and we say they can meet 6 times, but we don't say they cease to exist, they could still meet like on their own and say, hey, we're still the task force. Even though we said they could only meet 6 times.
I don't think that would really happen. I think if you don't have the cease to exist, I don't think it makes a material difference, frankly, but.
Okay.
They use the language also in literacy, something similar, ceasing to exist.
The console is designed to be permanent there. They repeal it after 3 years.
Right, okay. Yeah.
I did wonder about changing the word compile to review, only because it seems as if review looks at things that are already in existence, and compile means to sort of go around and collect all of these different things that are happening. But I don't know that there's a real distinction there. Do you think, Jim?
Well, I think they were worried about the task force actually going out and trying to compile lots of documents, as opposed to reviewing documents that AOE would provide them.
Okay, so it is more of, looking at what is already on file to see what kind of discipline is being meted out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, we changed the word from the bill that introduced to compile from something else. And I thought one of the goals collected, yeah. And I thought, and I think we had the same thing. We didn't want them to collect new data or have to work too hard. But I thought there was an advantage that the bill sponsors thought of having somebody put it all in one place instead of saying, we reviewed it. Then if you say, well, I want to review it, and you have to go recreate all the different steps that they do.
Well,
So Section 4 of the bill requires AOE to collect the data that's available and to give it to the task force. So
it is being gathered and
it's being gathered,
compiled, if you will.
and it's being given the review.
Yeah.
and I think that was one of my questions, as far as, we've talked about how the disciplinary structures differ from school to school. And how do you know that? Well, if AOE is collecting what's happening, then we would know. Okay.
Anything else at this point from Mr. Demaray? I think if senators would review this, Cheryl, if you have time, or Senator Hooker, particular eye, since you were the presenter, and we'll be bringing it either our changes or on the committee of conference or our concurrence, if you would just you have some time this weekend to take a careful look, and I will as well, and maybe we can touch base. But we will have Jay Diaz come in, since he helped and has been involved in these kinds of conversations. And if anybody wants to hear from anyone else sometime next week, just let me know. Does anybody want to hear from a member of the committee? Does that seem?
We could ask them about some of these things, but I guess it depends if we're looking to, if it's likely we're gonna concur or not.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Senator Lyons?
I was just gonna say, I'd rather wait until Senator Hooker looks it over and we have a minute to think more about it.
Yep.
Yep.
Sounds wise.
And
Okay.
say the reporter of the bill on the House side is Rep. Brady. So if you want somebody, it would be probably her.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so committee, given that we're going back to the floor in about 10 minutes, what I've asked Jeannie to do is to work with Becky Wasserman to and send us all of the sort of summary documents, any kind of additional information to give everyone an update over the weekend on where things are at with regard to pensions, the pension bill. Again, we didn't just, we never had possession of the bill. It was just more of updates and things like that. And I would encourage anyone who has a particular interest to engage with them as soon as possible, or certainly on the floor when it comes out. Any other questions before we adjourn? And Mr. Desmarais, if you don't mind sticking around, we'll just talk a little bit about a couple of things that we'll need. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.